Good morning, Las Cruces. You are tuned to KTAL 101.5 FM. This is Just Community, your Thursday morning show from 8 to 9, and I'm your host, Kari Bachman, here in the studios. You know, it's wonderful to be back at KTAL each week. You sort of have a way of marking the seasons and the weather, and today we're blessed by some beautiful, cool weather, but not too cold. Mesilla Valley, thankfully, doesn't get that cold compared to many places in the world. I'm really excited to be here this morning because we're going to be visiting with a guest who we last had on the show. I was looking through my notes back in March of 2018, so it's been quite a while. Kevin Moose is joining us this morning. Kevin, welcome to the studio.
Good morning.
It's great to have you here, and you've got so many interesting life experiences to share. Kevin, when I asked him how he'd like to be described this morning, he said, as a concerned citizen who's getting reestablished. And I think that's a really good description of you and where you are in your life at the moment. Before we get going any further, just to remind folks, community radio happens because of all of us. I mean, folks like me behind the microphone, folks like Kevin who come in to be guests on our shows, and most importantly, folks like you who are listening in. It is you who make community radio happen, because if we don't have listeners, there's no point in really having a radio station. And one of the things that I think is great is the opportunity from time to time to come together and really get to know each other. And we had just such an opportunity last Sunday. We had the Roadrunner Review. It was wildly successful down at the Rio Grande Theater. Want to give a big shout out to Linda Hall in particular. Lisa Luca did a lot of work as well, and all the board members and other volunteers. You know, it was an amazing celebration, and while the music was incredible and I really enjoyed it, my favorite part, and I guess that's not surprising knowing me, was hanging out outside and talking to people, whether it be other hosts, musicians, and in particular, listeners like you. So we appreciate all that support and hope that you, if you got there, were able to enjoy it with us. I am going to double check that my phone is off because I just heard a beep. Was that my phone, Kevin, do you think?
I think it was.
All right, just a moment.
I would just like to say good morning to everyone here in Las Cruces, and the weather is very nice today.
It is beautiful today. We're hoping it's not going to get too windy. You never know this time of year what might happen exactly. There, my phone is now off. So anyway, we are here with Just Community today and our guest Kevin Moose. And I'm excited to talk with you, Kevin, because, you know, your life, you've been in the Mesilla Valley for quite a while now, but life has changed a bit since we last talked to you in March of 2018. I know for one thing your housing situation is a bit different in terms of the way that you pay for your housing. Can you describe for us a little bit how that works?
I was lucky enough to get picked and make Section 8 housing.
You know, and before I started this work, I didn't really know what that meant. So tell us what Section 8 means.
The government pays for your rent.
And so what is the process like to get on Section 8?
You have to make the state lottery, statewide.
So it's almost like by chance?
It's a lottery.
And what are your chances of getting chosen?
I made it.
Wow. Some people I know are on that list for quite a while.
Some people have been on it for 5 or 10 years and haven't gotten it.
Really? Wow.
I got mine in about 8 months.
And so what's the difference been since you're now receiving Section 8? How does that affect your living situation, if at all?
Well, the rent was paid before and it's paid now, so it hasn't changed much. But once you make Section 8 housing, whichever state, because the entire United States does it, then after you've been with them for a year, which I'm passing next week, I can move anywhere in the country, and they pay it no matter where I go.
Well, and that is interesting, actually, because before that, Kevin, your housing was paid through special programs over at Mesilla Valley Community of Hope, which is wonderful. They provide housing assistance for folks who've been living on the streets. And yet, the longer they provide housing to one individual, the less able they are to help another person get off the streets. So Section 8 is really important in terms of enabling them to continue to help new people.
Yes.
And with Section 8, Kevin, are there housing inspections? I think you told me that there are.
Very strict inspections.
And what do they look for when they come into your home?
They're looking for everything. Doors that do not have sealant around it so that the cold air or hot air comes in and out, windows that do open and close for safety reasons, and all the water must be working for the bathroom and the kitchen and wherever you have water. Cleanliness as far as the floors and the carpet, the walls. They seriously look at everything.
And how often do you get inspected?
I've been inspected twice within less than a year.
And it's not something that you know when it's coming?
No, they tell you like within usually 10 days or less.
Oh, okay. So you do
They
have
give
a
you a
little bit of
date
warning.
and a time, and they say, just be there. Mm-hmm. You have to let them in.
And then if you fail that inspection,
you could lose Section 8 housing.
Wow, which would be a huge deal, obviously.
Yes.
And how does Section 8, to your knowledge, work with the landlords?
My landlord loves it. Before, my rent was paid from the Mesilla Valley Community of Hope, and they took a check over and paid him with a check. Section 8 wires the money in there on the very first day of the month. When he gets there on the first of the month, it's in his bank account.
So it's something that the landlords can really count on, and then they also know that they're not going to be turning over those apartments rapidly because of folks who can't make their rent.
Right. They like it very much because they know it's government funded, and they are going to get their money no matter what.
Wow. So it sounds like it's been really wonderful for you and for your landlord. I mean, what is it? What is the importance to you, Kevin, of having a place to stay? I mean, how does that change your life compared to living on the street?
It's a very big change, and it's a lot more sense of security, safety.
So
more
security
freedom.
And safe. So let's sort of unpack that a little bit. You started with the word security and safety. Do you have any particular examples of how it's more secure and more safe than living on the street would be?
Well, you would have, if you have an apartment or a house, you have a place that you can keep your things and lock it up so that it's not going to get stolen or destroyed or anything. So that would be the security. But the safety is you do not want to live on the street because of the weather. For one thing, Las Cruces has got very good weather, but there are people that live on the street in like Boston and New York and Chicago, and they're cold like more than half the year.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's harsh enough here. I mean, when I talked with you yesterday, you said, you got rained on, and
I did get rained on.
I was out of town, and a little bit of rain for someone who has a car or an apartment is not a big deal, but for someone who's walking around town with their possessions, it can be really devastating. Let me remind our listeners before we continue further, we are taking phone calls now here on Just Community, and so I would love to hear from you all. The number to call is 575-526-5825, and please have some patience when you call because I'm the one here running the control panel and also interviewing. But last week we had some really good success talking with 3 different callers. So we're hopeful Kevin Moose will get some calls in here. If you're interested in talking with us this morning, topics are going to be ranging from issues of housing and homelessness to incarceration, as well as life growing up in rural North Carolina. And you may hear, it's so funny when I talk to you, Kevin, my voice changes, and I know that it does. I get my North Carolina accent back a little bit, and it's just because Kevin and I both grew up
within 20 miles of each other.
20 miles of each other, and we're about the same age, but we didn't know each other that we can figure. Right? It's funny how life works that way.
I would remember if I would have met you in North Carolina.
Well, I probably would have remembered meeting you too. You're pretty memorable. We're visiting this morning here on Just Community with Kevin Moose. He is a self-described concerned citizen who's getting reestablished here in Las Cruces in New Mexico. You've lived here now, Kevin, quite a while.
Almost 11 years.
Almost 11 years is
January
amazing.
Will be 11 years, and that's only 2 months away.
Wow, that is quite a while. And of that time here, how much of that time was spent not having an apartment?
Over 7 years.
So over 7 years, I'm trying to imagine 7 years of my life. That's a long span of time. And that was spending every night pretty much either outside, at the mission.
I did stay at the mission for a while.
Mm-hmm. And so let's return a bit. You said there were two issues first that we mentioned, safety and security. So security, you were referencing it, I believe, mainly as regarding your own personal safety. And what are some challenges that you've experienced in the past living on the street in terms of personal safety?
Well, one thing, that the weather could be bad. So that's not being very safe.
What kinds of things have happened with bad weather to you in the past?
Snow.
Okay. And what do you do when it snows? Where do you go?
You try to get inside anywhere you can to where there's heat.
So it's not just a question of staying dry, but it's the question of staying warm, and both of those things together.
And it has been cold for like the last 4 or 5 nights.
Yeah.
Not last night, but a couple nights ago, I think we got down to about 21 degrees about a week ago.
So, I mean, for someone who doesn't have a place to stay that's inside of 4 walls and a roof, what are some warm type places that people look for?
The only place that I know of that is free that you can stay in Las Cruces would be the Gospel Rescue Mission, unless you're in jail or the hospital or treatment.
Actually, those are really good points.
That's all this town has is the Gospel Rescue Mission.
And it's actually not free anymore.
It's $7 a night, or you volunteer 4 hours or more, working in the kitchen or cleaning or doing anything.
And yet, so it used to be actually free. Now you have to pay $7. Have you stayed at the mission since people that they require in pay or else volunteer work?
I have stayed in the overflow, which they have when it's cold weather, like below 38 degrees at night. I don't know exactly what their cutoff is, but last night they would not have had it because it was like 48 degrees. And it's free. All you do is walk in, show your ID, and get a bed.
And so they set up in the mess hall area?
Yes, in the dining room.
The dining room area.
And they do have cots that they got from the Red Cross. They've got blankets. They've got pillows. They've got everything. And then you wake up, clean up, reset up the kitchen, dining room, and eat breakfast.
And then you're out again, though, right?
And then you leave.
They don't allow you to stay during the day.
No.
I think that's something that many folks may not understand, that most shelters, and we only, as you say, have one in this community, and we're a pretty big town, don't allow you to stay there during the day. So you've got to find somewhere to go. And
Walmart's open 24 hours a day.
So Walmart is a place that...
Or the mall opens because they unlock the doors at 7 to 9 in the morning before the stores even open. And there are people that go there for health reasons and walk around the mall because they're inside. But it's 70 degrees in there.
So those would be places that seem to be fairly hospitable, you would say?
Yes. Walmart's fairly hospitable unless you do something that's going to mess up their sales or anger their customers.
And what might those things be?
Do not ask anybody for money. Okay. That would be one of the first things I would say.
Okay. And so where, if you were to go to Walmart and to hang out, where in the store would you be allowed to hang out? Do they let you just walk around for hours, or did people get hassled for doing that?
I have never gotten hassled. And the Walmart that's on Valley has a McDonald's in it. You can go in and sit in there and have a cup of coffee for 55 cents and sit there for 2 hours. That's
an interesting point, and I know you do spend a fair amount of time at McDonald's.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things that I find interesting, Kevin, is I know you and a number of other folks who are in the process or have recently moved off the streets and into housing. And many times you continue to you like being outside and on the street. I mean,
it does have its own freedoms because you can do a lot of things that you cannot do normally.
Like what kinds of freedoms do you sort of give up when you get your own place?
You give up the freedom of not having to not worry about keys. And I have lost about 11 keys. I've lost every mailbox key I've had. And I keep going back to the landlord and getting door keys. And I mean, it's become a joke to him now. Because I always show up, and as soon as I walk in the door, he just hands me the key. So.
He knows that you're looking for another one. Well, when you're not used to kind of keeping track of keys,
I didn't have keys for 10 years.
Right. So that would be a challenge. I hadn't really thought about that before. Keys can be a challenge, I think, for most anyone, but
next to cell phones, yes.
Yes.
You want to know how many of those I went through? 9.
Wow.
And I bought a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things you were saying earlier too, Kevin, is that security living outside and living on the street is a challenge in terms of being able to know that your possessions are not going to get stolen or lost.
That's one of the biggest things about having a place to live is that you can get reestablished. You can collect whatever you need or buy whatever you need, and it's safe because it's locked up.
And you don't have to be carrying it around.
You don't have to carry it around and get rained on or snowed on or anything else.
That must be sort of a big relief, I would imagine.
Yes, and your listeners, if you ever see someone walking around carrying little plastic bags, it could be me.
Well, and Kevin, that's one thing that I think I've mentioned on many shows before is folks who live on the street or who perhaps are getting reestablished in housing usually don't have cars.
They have shopping carts.
They may have shopping carts, right?
I do not.
No. You're one who walks around with a lot of plastic bags.
Or backpacks. I've went through about 9 backpacks too.
Right. And so, I mean, in some ways it's interesting. You live a very visible life. I think a lot of people probably would recognize you because they've seen you walking around
It's
town.
very hard to hide when you're outside.
That was almost a nice rhyme it was a nice rhyme that you made, Kevin. Hard to hide when you're outside. And that can be both maybe good and bad?
That's true. Some people say the best place to hide is right in plain sight. And that's very true. There are people that have seen me all over town walking in it, but they don't know who I am.
Well, and that speaks to something, I think, that folks sometimes who are living at the margins are in a sense almost invisible because others choose not to see them or don't see them as part of their own reality. And that to me is very tragic, really.
It is. And I do know some people that come and go through the Community of Hope that are like that. It would be very, very difficult for them to get reacclimated to society. Even if they get a place to live, they're just mentally not up to it.
So what is it that you need to be up to other than keeping track of your keys?
I got a job.
Yeah.
I've had it for 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. And so work is something that can kind of help with a routine.
You definitely need a routine.
Yeah. Before we go any further, Kevin, I always forget that I need to do a station identification. So we'll pause for a moment and do that. You're tuned to KTAL 101.5 FM in Las Cruces, but we're also broadcasting throughout the Mesilla Valley. I was coming back from El Paso yesterday, and the fun thing coming over the mountains down toward Anthony is you can actually hear the radio station once you get to the top of the mountain there. And that's kind of fun to hear it on your way down the hill. We go all the way up to Radium Springs or so as well. But if you're not lucky enough to live in this beautiful Mesilla Valley, you can always tune in to lccommunityradio.org. And we are streaming live there 24/7. If you'd like to hear an archived show, maybe you want to listen back to our show with Kevin back in 2018, you can do that by going online at lccommunityradio.org. And I believe there is a link, I'm not sure how easy it is to find at the moment, to the archives of Just Community. But if you can't find it, just send an email there and I'll get it and I can give you that link. I'm your host, Kari Bachman, every Thursday morning, and we visit with interesting folks, residents of our Mesilla Valley generally, who have perspectives to shed light on issues of equity and justice, and they have perspectives that are not usually heard in public contexts. Often we hear from people who are in charge of social service programs or elected officials or, people with university degrees. And we don't often hear from the regular folk who are living their lives and whose experiences really do need to inform how we move forward. And Kevin, you've described yourself, and I know this to be true, as a concerned citizen. What are some of your concerns or desires for our community here in Las Cruces now that you've been here over a decade?
I would like it to become safer, healthier, happier people, better diversification for everything to grow so that the citizens here like it here, not just the weather.
That's interesting. So your sense of it now is that people really like it for the weather, but there are things that could improve?
Yes, there are a lot of people that move here because of the weather. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm definitely not retired, and I'm not old enough to retire. And yes, we are only like 2.5 months apart in age.
This is true. So Kevin, what kinds of specific things would you like to see improved in Las Cruces in terms of safety, for example?
Better bicycle lanes.
Mm-hmm. Why do you feel that that's important? Because I know you, at the moment at least, are not riding a bike.
Not today.
Yeah.
But it would help the environment if we rode bicycles more. Less gas emissions or carbon dioxide, whatever it is that kills people that comes out of cars.
The carbon monoxide, I believe, and other emissions as well can be very dangerous. Yes. And also look at, their effects on global, whether you call it global warming or climate change. It is real.
Same thing.
Climate change is happening. So you're thinking then that we need to have some more planning around things like bicycle lanes and some of that infrastructure.
Yes.
What is it like in terms of life as a pedestrian walking around this town? What do you notice that maybe somebody in a vehicle might not about how this town could be improved?
How crazy the drivers are here.
Tell us about that.
I'm from North Carolina, and I've lived from New York City all the way to Puerto Rico on every state on the East Coast except New Jersey. But I lived in Philadelphia, which was on the state line, so I didn't need to live in New Jersey.
So how is it that the drivers here compare to in those other places you've lived?
They're crazier.
And what do you mean? Like, what are some examples of that?
Examples would be that I don't think that they got their driver's license from the driver's license division. I mean, some people say Walmart gave it to them. I don't even think Walmart would go that far. No.
What is it that people do that you find just so unbelievable, the drivers?
Well, like at the Community Hope, the roundabout, they go out the wrong way. And I've seen that in the last 3 days 5 times.
Well, that is interesting. We don't really have a culture of using roundabouts here in the Southwest.
There's a lot of people that do not know what they are.
Mm-hmm. And so that's something that's going to take some time to develop. I know some people still to this day who avoid that roundabout out in front of City Hall on Main Street.
I love that.
Because they're afraid they're going to go through it and not do it right.
That's
in
true.
Their vehicles, so that's also a challenge. Like, how do we educate drivers and pedestrians, for that matter, about how to use roundabouts effectively, safely? So people, do they seem aware when you're moving around town as a pedestrian? Do drivers generally seem aware of you?
Most of them.
Okay, that's encouraging.
Whenever I'm walking, that's why we have sidewalks. I walk through parking lots and stay as far away from the road as I can.
That's interesting. So you actually would prefer to be in a parking lot than on the sidewalk next to the road?
Yes. Like if I'm going down El Paseo from the Community of Hope towards Albertsons, I will go through the parking lot where the Crunch Fitness is and behind all the restaurants. I'm a good 200 or 300 feet from that road, but it's safe. I mean, the only people that can hit you in there are the customers coming through the parking lots, and they're not going that fast.
That is interesting. They're not going that fast, and this is research actually supports this, that as drivers, even like a 5 or 10 mile per hour reduction in speed can greatly increase the chance of a pedestrian surviving this kind of a crash. And they say crash rather than accident. Accident sort of implies that, there's nothing that could be done to prevent it. There usually almost always is something that can be done to prevent a crash. And so you're saying something very true. I think we often think, well, the faster we can move traffic through streets, the better. But really all that does is encourage cars to go faster and faster. And
they do.
And they do, exactly.
It's scary. Mm-hmm. If you're walking, you can't stop a car from hitting you.
Well, and you can't get out of the way of a car either. Is that something that I know people have said that they actually think about? Like, I better jump so that I don't get hit.
I have jumped before.
And what happens?
I got hit one time.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It was over on Picacho and Spruce, up behind the library. I was crossing one of the small side streets, and the car made a left-hand turn and hit me. I went up on the on the hood of the car and slid off. They were shocked. And then when I stuck my head up, it scared them to death.
Wow. And so then what happened after that?
I got off the road.
Did the driver stop?
Yes, they had to. I was laying in front of the car.
Oh my goodness, Kevin. And so did the police come and then
No.
there were no police called or
No.
anything? Well, and
They were wanting to take me to the hospital or this or that, and I was like, I'm okay.
Well,
I was not hurt at all. I was sore a day and a half later, but I was okay.
Well, you actually were lucky that
I happened to see them coming before they hit me.
So you were able to avert being completely blindsided by that.
No, and they did make a left-hand turn, and it was dark.
Mm-hmm. So
but I was not wearing dark clothes either.
Mm-hmm. So I think part of what you're speaking to is people don't always think to look for pedestrians or people on bicycles because they're looking for those bright headlights of another car.
Wear light-colored clothes. Mm-hmm. And if you're on a bicycle, always have lights.
Yes, the lights are really important. Our streets here in Las Cruces tend to be really dark, and especially
some of them are very dark.
Yes, there are some corners of town
at night.
Mm-hmm. So you find yourself walking around at night a fair amount. How do the streets feel to you in terms of personal safety? Do you feel ever that you're at the risk of being, maybe attacked or assaulted?
I generally do not go anywhere when it's dark that I do not feel comfortable being.
Okay. And
or if I do, I'm with other people. Always go with someone else or stay in the light.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. That's good advice. Well, Kevin, let's switch for a moment.
Could I say something real quick?
Of course you may.
I wanted to say something about the community hub. We were talking about the housing, and they helped me get a place after about 10 years. I think it's last year, and I know the number. I think I've got the right number. 587 people were given houses or apartments or trailers or somewhere to live through the Community of Hope last year. It's over 500.
Wow. I don't know those exact numbers, and we should have looked them up before we came on the air, but I do know that this is a critical time of year in particular because it's starting to get colder.
Between now and March.
And those dollars and assistance are greatly appreciated by all of the organizations down there at the campus. It's called the Community of Hope Campus. Mesilla Valley Community of Hope is sort of the largest organization there, I would say, although Amador Health Center is probably way up there.
They've got two different sides.
They do. They've established a really beautiful modern clinic which takes patients with insurance and patients without, and I've actually received care there, and it's very good quality. I recommend folks going down there. That's Amador Health Center, and that's physical. If you have a physical ailment or just need, to see a doctor, you haven't been there for a while. If you need behavioral health services, to go to talk to a counselor. They have excellent counselors as well. And then, of course, there's the soup kitchen tucked right in there between their two facilities. They've got really good food, I think.
Oh, yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that works, and if somebody's interested in going down for lunch, what should they do?
They serve at El Caldito's Soup Kitchen lunch from 11:30 to 1, Monday through Friday, and everybody lines up outside, and they let so many in, and you go through and you get a tray, and then you go into the dining room and sit down and eat, and they have drinks at the back that you go with your styrofoam cup and get whatever drink you're wanting, and you sit there and eat, and then you just turn in your tray and leave. So
what would a typical lunch look like there?
We've had cheeseburgers. We've had French fries. They have a lot of chicken breast, chicken with bone in it, because that's one of the things that, like Walmart's and the grocery stores, donate the most of, because it's probably the cheapest and the one that they have the most of. So, but it's very good food, and it's very well balanced and nutritious if you eat all, and they have all the 5 food groups.
Well, they always serve a soup. I know that. And then they
Except
always
on
have,
Saturday when they have bag lunch.
That is true. Yes, Saturday is a little bit different. But during the weekdays, it's sort of anchored by a soup, and then they're often like one or two kind of casserole kind of things, some salad. Often they have hard-boiled eggs.
Yesterday
always some
we
dessert.
had boneless, skinless chicken breast, marsala, with salad, soup, dessert. They did not have boiled eggs yesterday, but it was a well-balanced meal.
Well, and then the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that people from, all kinds of circumstances eat lunch there.
Yes.
I'd really encourage listeners to go down and give it a try. It's an opportunity to visit with people you may have seen around town, but you've never actually stopped and talked to.
They do serve somewhere between 150 to 250 people a day, Monday through Friday.
Yes, and they've got a dedicated core of volunteers who come in and cook from all different organizations and individuals as well. So that is something you take advantage of every day, and it's really a social opportunity as well.
You get to see everybody.
Whether you want to or not.
Whether you want to or not. Because not only are the 200 people or so the soup kitchen, but then there's the Amador Health Center, which is on both sides of the soup kitchen. There's the Community of Hope, which is in charge of the whole place. And then there's the Casa de Peregrinos, which gives out food grocery carts, like a third full. And this coming Monday, they're giving out turkey boxes with the entire meal.
Well, that is a good reminder. Do people need to sign up for that, to your
Yes.
knowledge? Okay, that's what I had understood.
But there is also another one that's going to do it, and it's going to be at Lynn Middle School Monday, and it is it's the new insurance company. Western Sky is doing it.
Okay.
It's Monday. Both of just if you need to find out about that one, call the school. They'll tell you. The other one that that the Casa de Peregrinos is doing, I think it's going to be given away at Calvary because Calvary's got the big walk-in refrigerators and freezers because the Casa de Peregrinos, theirs is full all the time.
Yes.
So
yes.
they had to, and they did it last year at the same church.
Okay.
So the church people help and the Casa de Peregrinos staff, half of them will be there.
So there are really actually good opportunities for folks to have sort of a holiday meal celebration if you're not able to afford it for your family. Thank you for that, Kevin.
They also serve Thanksgiving, and the Gospel Rescue Mission serves Thanksgiving. And I have volunteered for both of them for like 9 years. And it's an entire meal.
I have cooked for the one at El Caldito before in the past, and it is actually really a great experience to go down on Thanksgiving, although I would say they need volunteers year round. It's not just during, the November, December time period. We don't want to forget another agency that's located there at Community of Hope, which is Jardín de los Niños.
Yes.
And that is a wonderful organization that provides childcare to families that may be not housed at the moment or not able to afford quality childcare. So, we're really unique in this community to have this Community of Hope campus, and I think many people may not know where it is. Let's tell them, Kevin.
It's at 999 West Amador. It's directly across from the Gospel Rescue Mission, very close to the railroad tracks on Amador. You can't miss it. It's about 300 or 400 feet coming towards the downtown mall from Valley.
Yes, and it's just walking distance from the transit center.
Horse and Hound is directly in front of it.
That's a good landmark there, too. So, big shout out to our friends and family members at Community of Hope, Amador Health Center, all of those folks there do a tremendous job. Kevin,
I did have one more thing to say about them. And we have discussed this for like the last year and a half about Lake Hope.
Yes, tell us about that.
They just finished putting in drainage and now it's fixed.
It
took them 4 years to do it, but thank you, the city of Las Cruces, because the city had to do it. They've had work orders in for 4 years.
Well, and this has been really a thorn in the side of everyone down there. When it would rain and flood, it would stay flooded in the parking lot. Like a third of that lot would stay flooded, and was a real health hazard. I mean, you think about mosquitoes breeding there, about things that could be, needles might be underneath the water, bad in so many ways. You can just imagine.
Fixed.
It's now fixed.
I'm impressed.
We'll have to see you the next big rain. I hope
it just rained, and I went down there because I wanted to see, and there was no water.
That is wonderful. I'm so glad that that's been fixed. These infrastructure projects cost a lot of money, obviously, but we tend to sometimes think the communities that have money are the ones that get the projects, and that is sometimes true. If you look at the nicest parks, in some cases that we have in our community, tend to be in neighborhoods that are fancier neighborhoods.
Young Park.
Well, Young Park is nestled into a more modest neighborhood, and so that's an example, I think, of a really nice resource in the midst of a neighborhood where folks may not have a lot of money and resources. But I'm thinking some of these more suburban parks in developments where, you know, they've got a beautiful swing set and landscaping and that kind of thing. Let me just remind folks of the number to call here before we go on and talk with Kevin Moose here this morning in more detail about his upbringing. We are here at 575-526-5825. The number to call to ask Kevin a question is 575-526-5825. And have some patience. I'm going to try to remember to look over here and make sure that I can see the line flashing when you call, and we will take your calls very willingly and be interested to hear from you. Before we continue, I just want to remind folks there's a really exciting event coming tomorrow and Saturday. This is an annual event, and the Potters Guild of Las Cruces holds an annual pottery sale. This is going to be at St. Paul's Methodist. That's at 225 West Griggs, and that'll be tomorrow from 12 until 6 and Saturday, November 23rd from 9 until 4. It's a wonderful place to pick up some gifts for the holidays, and the sale features original works from all kinds of wonderful area artists. The Potters Guild of Las Cruces annual sale, Friday and Saturday, the 22nd and 23rd of November at St. Paul's Methodist. So coming back, Kevin, to your experiences, we've been talking a bit about life on the streets. You have also experienced from time to time being at the detention center here in town. And that is a place I'm guessing some of our listeners are quite familiar with and others may have no experience with. So if you can describe for me a little bit what it is like a day in the life of someone living at the detention center here in Las Cruces.
Very boring.
You know, that's an interesting word that I might not have thought of, but boring. And it's boring
There's
because...
nothing you can do.
So there's no television?
Once you get out of the booking area and you go into the population, they do have televisions.
Okay.
And they do have a library that you can check out books. But it does only run one day a week in your area. So if you get a book, if you come in and move over to the population, but it's the day after the library, you have to wait 6 more days just to get something.
And then, so what do people do to pass the time?
Sleep, eat, talk. They have telephones.
But to use the telephone...
They're all collect calls, unless you have money in your account and you can pay for it. And it's not cheap.
I was just going to say, those calls are not cheap.
They're like $5 or $10 for a call.
I don't think they're quite that much, but it does depend on number of minutes and that type of thing. But it does sound, Kevin, the way you're painting the picture, to be an existence that is really pretty dull and boring. How many people, when you're housed in the general population area, are you actually physically in a space with?
They have separate sale areas all around it, but they have a big day area where the tables are for you to eat or sit and watch TV or anything. But normally there's 4 bunks per little cell block, unless they put somebody in a plastic boat looking thing with a mat. So 4 or 5 in one little room. But you're also talking anywhere from 35 to 60 in the cell block.
And so this is people milling around with nothing really to do. And so you could see how people would get in arguments, that tempers would be flaring. What happens in cases like that? How are arguments decided?
If someone was arguing or got in a fight, they would separate the 2 people and put them in different pods.
Okay. So are there guards constantly in amongst you all? Or?
They come through all the time. Mm-hmm. They have to, that's their job, is to walk around and come in through the pod and walk around and then go out and go to the next one and then go to the next one. But they are watching. And the entire thing is on camera.
So you really don't have a sense of any kind of privacy from those who are keeping you there or from your fellow inmates.
The only privacy that you would have from the detention center officers would be in the shower, in the restroom.
Okay. My goodness. So the days, how they must pass very slowly.
Yes. That's the reason I do not ever want to go back to that place.
Although one thing you mentioned earlier when we were talking about life on the streets, the jail does provide a place where you're out of the elements.
That's true. You're not cold and you're not hot. You're not wet. You're not snowed on. And you get 3 meals a day, whether you like it or not. If you don't like it, give it away. Somebody will eat it.
So in some ways, it's actually could be seen by some folks as like, wow, this is a relief to be off the street.
I have known people that it was in the middle of winter and it was going to be 5, 10, 20 degrees. I know somebody that picked up a rock and threw it through a plate glass window and then sat down right beside of it and waited on the police just so that they could go to jail, and then put off their court appearance just so that they could stay in there for the 2 months of winter. And then got out because it was time served, didn't pay a penny, but they did it specifically to get off the street.
Wow, when we think about what kinds of incentives we're putting in place for people, this is just completely backwards from what we'd like to see.
I wouldn't do that. I'd stay outside where it was cold.
Well, I mean, ideally what we would like to see is opportunities for people to have dignified housing without having to commit a crime in order to get out of the elements. And as you say, we really do not have a lot of options here. We have great agencies that do good work, and yet there are not a lot of options beyond the shelter. We obviously have, and we haven't talked about this, Tent City, Camp Hope, which does exist. Mm-hmm.
And I remember when it was started, because I helped do it, and this was like 5 years ago.
Longer than that now.
Well, it's one of the best in the nation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's actually a model.
Yes.
But have you ever lived there, Kevin?
Never. They tried to get me to live there and tried to get me to live there. And there were 2 or 3 of the counselors that were talking to me about it. And my counselor walked up into the Community Hope's lobby and said, "You got housing, you move in tomorrow for free." And the other ones all took off running because they had been pushing me to move in there. And I didn't. And I did. I moved into my apartment the next day.
So why did you never move into Camp Hope?
I didn't want to.
Why is that?
Well, I grew up as a Boy Scout. I've camped a lot. Mm-hmm. But that's, your house is the tent. So, and I would rather not have that.
So you would rather actually be living on the street than be living in a tent at Camp Hope?
Yes, but now that I have an apartment, I don't need to worry about it.
Right, right.
As long as I do not mess up my Section 8 housing, that's for the rest of my life.
You know, one of the things folks who have been not housed say is difficult about getting an apartment is they feel lonely.
That's true. And I can also say that the Community Hope has 2 counselors that specifically do one thing. If you are a veteran, they can get you housing in 2 days or less right now.
Yes, the veterans are a special group, and there are special grants that enable them to get housing pretty quickly. Although, you know, one of the things I think that's challenging is housing is a piece of the solution, but it's not the only thing that people need.
That's true.
And you know, Kevin, I know for in your case, it's challenging because you deal with other issues as well. What are some of those challenges that you face in your life?
Other than housing?
Mm-hmm.
Food.
Okay.
Medical attention.
You know, the medical thing has been big for you recently.
I have to have head surgery.
Yes, and I know that's been weighing on you.
I've known about possibly having to do it for months, but I did just find out that I do have to have it.
And that's not an easy thing to think about recovering from and what that's going to be like. And My understanding is, it may help you be healthier and live longer, but at the same time, it's traumatic in the meantime, trying to deal with the thought of doing it.
And anything could always go wrong whenever you're in surgery.
Yes, that is true too. Is that surgery that's related to past injuries or?
A car accident in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
So head injury back then.
Oh my goodness! So that was a head injury, and so it's basically looking at trying to repair some damage done then.
Messed up.
Well, our healthcare system is so damaged and broken in many, many ways, and I think in some respects, Kevin, you probably have pretty decent access to care now.
I've got very good access,
and that's because thanks to Amador Health Center.
I'm one of their clients, and I also have a doctor down on El Paseo, and he's been my doctor for almost 7 years.
Mm-hmm. So you actually have some consistency of care as well.
Very good consistency.
Well, I would just, again, shout out to folks who are listening, go check out Amador Health Center. They will take many forms of insurance, and that actually helps them provide services to folks who do not have insurance. Kevin, you're lucky enough to have access to insurance.
Yes, I have Medicaid. Mm-hmm. And about a year to a year and a half ago, I remember getting my insurance card in the mail, and I went straight to the Amador Health Center and got them to photocopy it, and they charge my insurance all the time now. Mm-hmm. And I said, it can only help people that do not have it.
Yeah.
And they agree.
Yes. No, it's true. And also you getting care there is actually keeping you out of emergency room services, which are very expensive, as we know. Kevin, we've got about 15 minutes left, and listeners, if you'd like to call, my guest today here on Just Community is Kevin Moose. The number to call is 575-526-5825. That's 526-5825. Call us with any questions you might have if you're interested in knowing more about what life is like in our detention center or life is like on the streets or being recently housed. Kevin is a wealth of information. And Kevin, let's turn a little bit now, because I think your childhood is actually really interesting as well. You've mentioned earlier in the show that you grew up in rural North Carolina.
Yes.
And talk to us about what life was like in the community and in your family growing up.
I grew up in the small town that I did grow up in. Still is about 9 miles from the closest stoplight. It's in the middle of nowhere. But I grew up on a farm. Most of my family, aunts and uncles and grandmother and the whole family, the road was named after my grandmother's maiden name.
Wow, so you all went way back.
We lived on a section of about 2 miles of it. So that was a long time ago, but I think I had a fairly good childhood bringing up. I did grow up Southern Baptist and had a loving family, and we had family reunions and things all the time. But it was, I hate to say, it looks almost like the Waltons, because my family was not like the Waltons at all. But we took care of each other.
And growing up on a farm, you probably learned things that city kids like me or suburb kids like me didn't even have an opportunity to be exposed to.
Milk a cow,
mm-hmm.
and a goat,
mm-hmm.
and slop the pigs, and feed the chickens, and bale hay. I've baled enough hay to fill up a football stadium.
So is there anything about that life that you miss now?
No.
Tell me, why is that, Kevin?
No. If I ever have any animals again, I would not mind having a cow or a goat to milk, but not a whole flock of them. And I wouldn't mind having some chickens, because you have fresh eggs all the time and fresh milk. And we could have went through a depression, and my family always had food. Always. Plus, we had gardens.
I was going to say you were growing vegetables as well.
Oh, yes.
What kinds of vegetables did you grow up eating?
Corn, green beans, carrots, cabbage, lettuce, pinto beans. We grew peanuts one time. People have no idea peanuts grow in the ground.
That's true.
Most
they do.
of the other nuts are all on trees, but peanuts are in the ground. watermelons, cantaloupes, cucumbers, squash, just about everything you can think of. Potatoes.
Wow, so very well-rounded diet, it sounded like. And so are there things about North Carolina that still you miss a little bit and think maybe I'd like to go back?
Yes, I miss North Carolina.
What aspects of it?
My family. The 4 seasons, which are very distinctive. The beauty of all 4 seasons, especially right now in the autumn with the leaves and everything. And we barely have leaves here. There's more trees in my hometown than there is in this whole county.
And what kinds of trees have such spectacular color there in the fall?
The oaks, the maples. I think our state tree is a pine tree. It's either the pine tree or the dogwood. But there are beautiful trees, and the autumn is like the perfect time. Everybody likes to drive to the mountains and ride around and look at it, and to me that's boring. And I've done it many, many, many times. But it's completely different than being here because we go straight from summer to cold weather.
Well, we do have more and more trees, I think, that change color. I've lived here now for over 20, almost 30 years, and I notice there are more trees that are have fall color now. And it may be because folks like us from back east who move here
are putting them here. That
may be part of it. But you know, there are things about life in North Carolina that are beautiful and that I miss. Although, you know, growing up as you and I did in North Carolina, we are white, Anglo-Saxon, and I think there are realities that were pretty invisible to us.
American Indian.
Well,
75%.
Okay, and that's a good reminder, Kevin.
Cherokee.
You have significant background in Cherokee Nation. And yet, you present, if somebody looks at you,
they're going to say I'm white.
As being white.
People say I do not look Indian at all.
And so, what is that? How do you address that in terms of your identity? Like, what does that feel like to you?
It does make me feel a little bit upset because I am Indian. I mean, 75%. That's most Indian, but they're like, you don't look Indian at all. So I don't, and I've had many people say that, not just one.
Well, and I apologize. I mean, I just said it. And to me, you know, you have vivid blue eyes, and the Cherokee Nation is a nation that is not prevalent in this part of the country. And so it's not as if there are, you know, there's a community.
There's not that many Cherokees in this county. Mm-hmm. Very few.
Yeah, yeah. And yet, I mean, looking the way you and I do, our lives were different from people who were brown and black people living in North Carolina.
Yes.
And those realities were stark and very devastating, and continue to be in many cases.
I remember the racism in the early 70s.
Describe that a little bit.
It was deplorable. It really was. It's not like it, nowhere near like that now. But
what kinds of ways did that manifest?
I don't know how it changed altogether. It didn't do it very fast. But I don't remember ever meeting a black person until I was like 7 or 8 years old. They did not live anywhere near me. Anywhere.
So when you went to school, was your school integrated?
Yes, it was, but there were very few black people.
Uh-huh. And so what was that like for you, meeting African Americans at that age when you had not been exposed to people who were...
It was different.
Different. Mm-hmm.
It was completely different. I was like, you've got a good tan. But it's completely... I remember it was around 1973. I wasn't that old.
Well, and the Klan was still very active in North Carolina in the 70s. Active. I mean, it was one of the more active places for the Klan in the 70s. And that's really disturbing when you think 1970s, that's not long history ago. That is very, very recent time. And the Klan, of course, is still operating, and white supremacist groups are continuing to morph and change. I mean, these are realities that exist in our state as well, not just in the South, the Southeast. It's around our country. And I just point that out because as somebody who is a white woman, it's often not obvious to me that these systems of oppression still exist and do exist. And that's basically how our society functions, is based on those systems. So, Kevin, what, in the few minutes that we have left, what messages would you share with our listeners about how all of us can work together to combat these systems of oppression?
I would say have a very open mind and try to treat everybody that you meet like you would want to be treated. And if you do that, everybody should be getting along a lot more than they are now.
And do you find that when people do that, they have an opportunity to learn new things and change their own perspectives?
Yes. I've learned from different cultures because I'm friends with them. And then I see how they grew up and what they were taught and what they learned, which is different. A lot of it was different from what I was taught.
Well, and that's a good point, that there's not any one right or wrong way of running a family or a society. There are lots of different ways it can work, and being open to those differences and then working together to make change. Kevin, I really appreciate that you've been able to be with us here this morning on Just Community. It's been a long time since we've been able to visit with you.
I was happy to come.
Well, thank you so much. You are an important part of our community. Your perspectives, your energy, your sense of humor enliven all of us. I really sometimes refer to you as the town crier.
That's not the first time I've heard that either.
You are somebody, if you want the word to spread, let Kevin know, and he will tell everybody he knows, whether it's an event or about an opportunity. And, that is the way that the community can come together. And that's actually, that used to be a job of people, to be a town crier. And it's something that I think we've lost a little bit as we turn to our electronic devices to find out what's going on. Turn to the friends and people around you and ask them. That's a great way to start building community. And Kevin, you do a great job doing that.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you being here in the studio today, Kevin. Thank you so much for appearing with us on Just Community, and thank you, listeners, for continuing to tune in. Join us next week. We'll have another interesting guest. We will actually be broadcasting live on Thanksgiving morning with a gentleman, and we will be continuing to explore issues related to homelessness and housing. I think you'll find his perspectives very interesting. And until then, take good care. Bye-bye now.